Hello, hello. So often in the personal development space, you'll hear about open or unhealed inner wounds, sometimes called inner child work. And if you're not familiar with that concept, it's revolutionary, in my opinion, and has led me through my binge eating recovery in such a big way. So today I want to talk about what it means to have open or unhealed inner wounds, why it's important to heal them, how to recognize them, and how to go about healing them. There's even skepticism around the word heal because it implies, once it's healed, we won't ever experience pain from that wound. And we'll talk about that too, because I think that's an important concept to discuss as well, especially as it relates to binge eating recovery. Often when we suffer from compulsive behaviors or addictions, you'll see that sometimes people will replace one addictive behavior with another. And that's not what we want to do. It's never the intent. And so hopefully today's episode will provide some helpful perspectives and ideas that can help you navigate your binge eating recovery. Hopefully you'll start to understand why you binge a bit more and be able to offer yourself so much compassion and grace as you do this very important work. So what does it mean? So what does it even mean to have open inner wounds? Well, in a nutshell, the idea is that when each of us were born, we had no wounds. We were purely innocent, unscathed, if you will. If you think of young children, they're often characterized as innocent, playful, naive, creative, joyful, trusting. There's not much weighing them down. And then life happens. Hurt, pain, suffering happens. We're wounded. Some of us in lots of ways, some of us in just a few ways. Sometimes those wounds are gashing and deep, and sometimes those wounds are small and shallow. And because children are so young and dependent and not able to cope with those wounds, they rely on their parents or caregivers or other authority figures in their lives to help them heal those wounds and manage them. But often that healing doesn't happen, or it isn't available for a number of reasons. Even with the most loving, most enlightened parents, wounds are inevitable. Like I mentioned, this is sometimes called inner child work, or in IFS, which is internal family systems therapy, which I'm a huge fan of, by the way. They call it our wounded exiles. These are the parts of us that took on the wound. And these parts of us are kind of seen as frozen in time because as children, we're so impressionable, we're so sensitive and fragile, and we don't have the skills to protect and keep us safe. Therefore, these wounds feel excruciatingly sensitive, like these painful emotions will kill us. So the idea of inner wounds is that we all have them, and we've developed strategies to cope with this pain. And by cope, I typically mean avoid. We subconsciously want to avoid this pain because, like I said, it feels like we will die if we access that pain. So traditional therapy will call it having defenses or defense mechanisms to help us avoid this pain. In IFS, it's called protectors, which are parts of us that take on the role of protecting this wounded exile to keep it locked away so that we can feel safe. And the goal with inner wound work is that we'd kind of bring those wounds out into the open and heal them by giving them what they needed in that moment in the past when the wounding took place. We do that by offering them compassion, warmth, safety, whatever they needed, so we can let go of these protective roles, these defenses that keep them exiled and shielded. So why do we want to do that? Why do we want these parts of us to heal? What's the point? Well, often our defense strategies can be destructive in a lot of ways, both to ourselves and to others. These defense strategies can look like, finding emotionally unavailable romantic partners because you have an open wound of abandonment. So you're able to be safe by not actually getting close enough to another person. Sometimes it looks like never taking risks because you have an open wound around failure that made you feel unworthy and unsafe. So you stay safe and don't strive to achieve goals or fulfill your purpose. In terms of binge eating recovery, the act of binging is often a defense mechanism or protector coming online to put out the fire of our inner wounds so that we don't have to feel them, which is why food is often numbing or distracting. The benefit of healing our deep inner wounds is a life lived authentically. There are a lot of ways to describe this. IFS calls it living in your self energy, kind of capital S self, and to be self-led. Other practices call it being in your essence or being true to your core, living from your soul. So if we healed these wounds, we wouldn't have to have these defenses at all. And we could live a life that's more authentic, more real, when we're able to live in our essence more of the time. So our actions aren't driven by fear. Instead of living out of fear, instead of having your pain and anxiety leading your decisions in your life, you let yourself lead your way in the world, which would not only be the most authentic, but also the most fulfilling way to live. It's been said that our greatest contribution to society will come from the healing of our deepest wounds. Okay, so how the heck do we heal these wounds then? And is it even possible with these really loud, really strong defenses or protectors that we've adapted? And how do we even begin? Well, like most of the advice I offer, it's up to you to see what works for you. I can tell you how I direct my clients and what has worked for me. It's not a linear kind of copy and paste process, but I can offer you a framework that will hopefully be a very helpful starting point. Some of this stuff I've already talked about, like learning how to feel your feelings. But when you see it in this bigger picture, it could be a really helpful perspective to adapt. So first, when you have an uncomfortable feeling and or these kind of repetitive or compulsive thoughts, I'd first identify it as a part of you. A part of you is experiencing this. Doing this creates that separation that I keep talking about. You are not your feelings, you're not your thoughts. A part of you is experiencing an uncomfortable emotion or compulsive thoughts. Then you're going to drop the story your brain is offering up in response to this part of you. Those stories could look like, intellectualizing or rationalizing your way out of them, saying things like, this isn't a big deal, I shouldn't feel this way, I got to get over it. It could look like resisting it or avoiding it by distracting yourself and keeping yourself busy, which is what a lot of us tend to do naturally. And this is where our defenses that we've adapted start to play in. It could look like going into victim mode, saying things like, this always happens to me. Why can't I just catch a break? Why can't I just be happy? This isn't fair. It could look like doom and gloom mode, where, your story is something like, there's nothing I can do. It's happening. I'm going to binge. Or once I start, I'll never stop. I'll never figure this out. It could look like going into inner critic mode. This one is loud for a lot of us, but this is kind of that story of, I'm the worst. I'm not strong enough to do this. I'm such a loser. I'm so weak. I'm hopeless. It could look like fighting with reality, saying things like, this shouldn't have happened, or this shouldn't be happening. These stories that our brain comes up with distract us from the real wound and compound our suffering. So we want to drop them. And how do we drop them? And this is where our bodies are wiser than our brains. This is where you'll try to get out of your brain and tune into your body. And when you find yourself going back up into your brain, just gently, compassionately bring your attention back to your body. Then once you've kind of dropped the story and you're in your body, you're going to want to start to feel the feeling. Where do you feel it in your body? What does it look like? Is it moving? Is it heavy or light? Does it have a color or texture? Is it hot or cold? Is it making a sound? Is there any imagery associated with this feeling, like a fire, an anchor, a wall? So often teachers, coaches, and therapists will tell us to just feel our feelings, to just have the courage to do it. But how do we get that courage? How do we do it? I did a whole episode on how to process emotions. I think it's number 14. But overall, the power comes from being able to drop the story, to get out of our heads and feel the vibration in our body, and giving that vibration enough space to flow and process through us. The idea is that if our feelings are like waves of water, which is my favorite way to think about feelings, as you might know if you've listened to me before, our thoughts or stories about these waves are like a dam holding it inside, making the waves compound, become unruly, and overflow into all areas of our lives. Whereas if we just let our feelings flow naturally without trying to contain them, they wouldn't overflow and will naturally higher and lower at manageable levels. Now, this skill of feeling your feelings is an absolute game changer. If you do this, so much of that compounded suffering is released. we're a lot less afraid to do the big, scary, desirable, beautiful things in life because we learn that the worst thing we can experience is a feeling, and a feeling won't kill us. It's a life-giving realization, I can tell you that. So once we start practicing feeling our feelings, life will feel more open, more authentic in a lot of big ways. This is where a lot of teachers will kind of stop. Like, this is it. Life is about learning how to feel so you can be free. And in fact, where I got certified as a coach, the idea of just kind of opening up and feeling the urge to binge, and the more you allow that urge without escaping yourself, that urge will dissipate and go away. And I have to tell you, friends, that didn't really work for me. It kind of did. Yes, the binges lessened in their intensity, but there was still some pain there that felt it needed food to be okay. So I had to search for more concepts. I had to keep learning, and I'd find more ideas centered around this subject, because even when we learn to feel our feelings, there are still these open wounds from our inner child, and part of us doesn't know that a feeling won't kill us. This inner child part doesn't know that. A part of us still very much believes that if we will die, a part of us still very much believes that we will die if we ever experience that feeling again. So many of us, when we learn the skill of feeling feelings, what happens is there's still such inner wound fear that we're not often even aware of it. So even though a part of us isn't afraid to feel, our inner child part of us is still terrified because it's kind of been blocked this whole time. So this pain keeps resurfacing over and over, even though we just keep feeling the feelings. So let's talk through how to heal that inner wound, which again is a huge topic. And it's like books, and there's so much to talk about. But here's a method for you to try. It's kind of a structure, a loose structure, if you want to. And it's kind of based in IFS. So first, what you're going to want to do is get to a neutral, kind of curious place about this feeling or this pain that you're experiencing. And by that, I mean, if you see this pain or discomfort as a part of you, like if you can see it as a separate part of you, how do you feel toward it? Do you hate that it's here? Are you annoyed by it? Do you wish it would just go away? Are you feeling afraid of it? If there's any of that judgment there, meaning any other feelings other than kind of neutral curiosity, then you're not ready to get to know that part just yet. If you're judgmental of this pain, see your judgment as another part of you. Can that judgment part of you give you the space to be with this painful part? Can you remind your judgmental part that you're safe and you're seeking to understand this pain because you want to heal and unburden it? Once you're able to be neutral and curious about the pain, you'll want to get to know it. And that can look like asking your pain some questions, which might be odd, but stay with me. Questions like, what do you want me to know? Or what are you afraid will happen if you weren't here? Hopefully, eventually, you might need to ask multiple times, different days, you'll be able to understand the intention and reasons behind the pain. Typically, what you might learn is that there are parts of us that are trying to protect us. This might sound a little woo or kind of abstract. So let me give you like an actual example, which again is a little abstract because it's my personal experience. But for example, I had a binge part of me that felt, if I were to give it some imagery, it felt like a bottomless dark pit. And what it felt like was that a part of me was trying to like claw my way out of this dark pit. And after I'd make so much progress, that bottomless pit would kind of suck me back in. It would, stay with me if this is weird, but having a real life example might help. So I hated that bottomless pit. It kept telling me things like, this is who I am. I can't be free to live above ground in the light. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy enough. But once I kind of put my hate for it aside and was instead open and curious about it, because I knew that I was safe and I got to know it, what I learned is that this bottomless pit, it was keeping me stuck, keeping me in the dark, because that's what was safe in its mind. Because that's what it thought was safe. Being exposed in the spotlight, achieving and growing, left me open and vulnerable to ridicule and rejection, which are painful experiences in my past. So by keeping me stuck and hidden, it was keeping me safe by not allowing me to access that painful rejection wound of my past. So in regards to your protector part, can you offer it some compassion and even some appreciation for at least trying to keep you safe? If you can't offer it compassion and appreciation, there's another part of you that's blocking that. And can you ask that part of you that's blocking the compassion and appreciation to make space? Once you can offer the painful part, that compassion and appreciation, will it let you access the part of you that it's protecting? If not, that's okay. It might be too much too fast. You can just keep showing up to gain trust with this part of you. The part of you that your pain is protecting is usually an inner wound formed in childhood, and when these big, painful emotions were too much for us to bear. But now we're adults. We can be with negative emotions and offer ourselves the love, safety, and compassion we didn't get in the past. Once we're granted access to our exiles or our inner wounds, what we want to do is try to heal and release the wound. Can we be with our inner child or our inner wound? Can we offer our little version of us what she needed in that moment? Where is her pain? Does she carry it on her body? Does it live within her? Does it surround her? Can we help her drop the pain, the burden? Often people might want to let go of the pain by metaphorically placing it in rushing waters, or maybe by tossing it off a mountain, or by throwing it into the air or space, or setting it on fire. Can we help our inner child, this wounded exile, release her wound? And then can we bring her with us to the present moment of safety? Okay. Whew. That might be a lot to take in. This whole process and structure is kind of a lot to take in. And I recommend listening to this episode multiple times if you need to. I know that I needed to hear these concepts and processes over and over and over again until it started clicking. And you might be wondering, okay, I can understand how we would heal these wounds and kind of let them free. But can we actually heal all of our wounds? Wouldn't people or situations re-trigger the wound? Will the pain ever stop? Is there a place where we get to where we never feel pain? Those are big questions. And the truth is, I don't know. I've heard of people that have reached enlightenment who say they don't suffer anymore. I'm not sure, because I definitely still do. I think it's just helpful to work on these wounds so that we can feel as authentic and as true as we can. So we're not operating from fear and shame. Like I mentioned, IFS calls this being self-led or having self-energy, and the self, with a capital S, is the one who sees the parts of us, who manages those parts of us, who frees them of their burdens, because our self can keep us safe. What I do know is that since healing some of my inner wounds, I've been able to access my capital S self much more often. I've noticed that when I'm in self-energy, I'm able to be curious, compassionate, open, and so much more loving, both to myself and to others. The things that matter when we're being led by our fears and doubts matter a whole lot less when we're self-led. Things like outward success, achievement, perceived perfection, other people's perceptions, etc. Those things kind of fade away when I'm in self. And I do think that when we drop the importance of those things, we start to show up in the world and contribute to the world in a much bigger, more authentic, more satisfying way. And obviously, no longer binging as a way to escape the pain is such a beautiful gift I've given myself through all of this hard work. I definitely didn't do it perfectly. I don't know how to do it perfectly, but I never gave up. I kept leaning on self-compassion and self-forgiveness to get me through. If this is interesting to you, if you'd like to lay down your defense mechanisms so that you can operate more from a place of authenticity and abundance versus fear and self-doubt, I'd love to help you and be with you through that process. Schedule a free 30-minute call with me so we can chat through what my 12-week End Secret Binging program entails, so you can decide if it's a right fit for you. Visit sammybeecoaching.com, that's SAMMYBEE coaching.com, to schedule that call and take that first step toward healing. And if you could rate, review, and share the podcast with others, that would be so appreciated as well. All right, that's it for now. See you next week, friends.